guess what's probably a good idea is for us to maybe just reconstruct the gist of the argument so far, since we're about to jump right back in where we left off 9 days ago, and our memories might be a little rusty.
Yeah, I missed the first half anyway, so
you did?
yeah.
Okay, so it'll be useful for you, for anybody listening, if they're just jumping in now for the first video. Does anybody have any thoughts to start the ball rolling on the reconstruction of this dialogue, the Phaedo, since we're on the second reading right now? Do you remember what it's about, where we were coming from?
I got my notes.
You got your notes?
I guess if the page went up, I would recall, but you're talking to an old fart here.
Okay, well, maybe Jerry could do a quick reconstruction for the audience listening at home, and we can all just chime in a thought or two if something occurs to us that Jerry skips out on.
Okay, this is just what I wrote down, but I think it started where Socrates and Cebes and Simmias are talking about philosophers, and why philosophers don't fear death, don't fear dying, because they live their life not caring about pleasures of the body, and they're seeking wisdom within the soul. And so they're thinking that when they finally die and they're separated from the body and soul, then they'll be able to they'll be more likely to possess wisdom, because they don't have to worry about the body anymore. And then Cebes says, but when the body dies, doesn't the soul not exist anymore either? And that's when Socrates was talking that all things are generated from their opposites of dying and coming to life. And so the living are generated from the dead, and so then the dead must be generated from the living. And and that's when Simmias, they're talking about the idea of recollection. And Socrates says, when we see things that are equal, we derive the idea of equality. And with our senses, when we compare things that are almost equal, it shows that we must have had this previous idea of equality. We must have had this knowledge before. And so the soul must have acquired this knowledge before birth. And they go on that if the beautiful, if the good exists, then our soul exists. But if the beautiful and the good and ideas don't exist, then our soul doesn't exist either. And they come to the conclusion that, okay, the soul exists before birth, but does it exist after death? And I think it's at that point where we ended part one and went on to part, and we're going to start the second part. So they're going to debate whether the soul exists after death. So that's my notes.
Right.
Summary, Jerry. Could I add something to that I just discovered? I read recently that Mendeleev, I think the name is, the guy who discovered the periodic table, it came to him in a dream. The periodic table from chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
I think his name is Mendeleev or something like that.
Dmitry Mendeleev.
Mendeleev, yes.
Mendeleev, or well, whatever. My Russian is very even poorer than my French.
Well, Leibniz also described how I forget which essay it was he was writing about scientific dreams. So
the monads, yeah.
Well, he's the guy who develops his idea, the concept of the monads that we often utilize today. But in his philosophy of, or his thinking about dreams, he described how upon obsessing over weeks and months over a problem, which all, you know, like creative scientists whose thoughts bear fruit, they need unbroken concentration on an idea that their mind is just working on and working on all the time. He said that his dreams began to be shaped, and over time he started waking up with flashes of insight that he didn't have while he was awake. But I think that momentum that he gave himself mentally when he was awake over weeks and months of just, again, reasonable thought crunching it shaped it even like educated his dreams, so they weren't like random like a lot of our dreams are, or they're just like a lot of our dreams are colored by subconscious, you know, fears and emotions and whatever else with imagery. When you get to that place where Mendeleev as well was very Leibnizian too, like when you read Mendeleev's writings on the principles of chemistry, it's he's completely using this Leibnizian approach and a Keplerian approach too. Always asking like, well, why do certain attributes periodically reappear in elements that I'm exploring, right?
Are you speaking specifically of Mendeleev?
Mendeleev specifically, yeah, like his writings in English, where he
This is what I was reading recently. Just strange how it sort of coincided with what we were talking about.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. And this idea that recollection is sort of like a discovery is it's a discovery of something that is sort of vectored in the past, whereas a discovery of something that you have some previous knowledge of that you're bringing back into your focus, whereas a discovery of something you haven't made is sort of that's in the future. So, but it's sort of the similar process of going from not knowing to knowing, which is how Plato looks at like how we were in a state of ignorance. We yearned to solve that ignorance problem, whether it's of a memory we forgot, or whether it's of a thought we haven't had before, but we want to solve a problem. Either way, we're ignorant, and then we become, through a moment of eureka, of aha, knowledgeable of that thing we were seeking, either in the past or in the future. And that's a really great way of just getting at the fact that there must be something more than the simple brain or body, but something, you know, that transcends it, that relates to soul. And like Jerry was saying, we got to the place where just because we prove that there is a soul so far in the dialogue doesn't mean that we've proved that it doesn't dissipate like smoke with the body when the body dies. So the kids are still afraid. Simius and Cebes are still worried and concerned that we shouldn't be celebrating yet. So
I'll bear that in mind.
So I'm gonna do a little screen share here. Hey, Pascal. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, hi.
Can you send that to Rising Tide, Matt?
What would you like?
I cannot see it on my screen. Can you send that link to Rising Tide so I can open up?
Yes, I can. I think Jerry also sent it in the chat box, but I'll just send it here to your email right now. Here we are. Does anybody else need the PDF of what we're reading, or the Plato dialogue? Everyone else has it?
Yep.
I got a big screen, so.
Okay, good.
I just put on my reading glasses.
Excellent. All right, so we're using the edition that Jerry discovered. So far, it's been smooth and flowing really smoothly.
Yes, I like this translation.
It's good, Jerry. You know, it's a really good translation you found. Really good. All right. So we need a Cebes, we need a Simias, and we need a Socrates. So who wants to be Socrates?
That's going to be the most.
You, Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry, you're being volunteered.
Yes, I'm volunteered. Okay, you volunteered me. Okay, I'll do Socrates.
Who wants to be Cebes?
Sure.
All right, Pascal is Cebes.
What page are we on again?
273.
273. Okay.
Eureka or Bob, we need a Simius.
All right. Okay. Unless you want, Simius could be Anybody, yes. But
Pardon me?
I don't know where Simius would come in.
We're
Right.
gonna find out. I think right now it's CB's and Socrates, but
All right.
Simius will be jumping in.
I'll look for Simius.
Okay. All right. So Jerry, where do you want to start?
Oh,
I didn't get it yet. Did you send it to my email?
I sent it to your email. Yeah, you didn't get it? Okay. Let me have a look again. Eureka.
Gonna be able to eat a little bit.
Yeah, now's the time. Eureka. I just sent it again to you in your Eureka at Hotmail.
I just see Eureka spells her name with a Y-O. It's
Can
not.
you send it to Rising Tide? I can't find it in my.
Oh, you mean the Telegram group? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I wasn't on my phone, so I didn't know what you meant. Okay, second.
Not coming up on my email for some reason.
Oh, right.
I have no idea what that Telegram thing is you're talking about.
All the kids are doing it these days, Jerry.
And who am I again? Sorry.
You are Eureka.
Eureka. Yeah, I was asking. All we have are Socrates, Simius, and Cebes for the time being. So, unfortunately, you missed your ticket. But we'll switch things up. So in about 45 minutes or so, we'll do a switch up of things, and you can be Socrates. Okay.
Yeah, when I lose my voice, then you can take over.
Okay. So it's in the Rising Tide study group on the phone. Okay. All right. So Socrates, where shall we begin?
Near the top there where he says, well then, I think that's a good spot.
Okay.
Everyone ready? I can go? All right.
Sí, señor.
Well then, must we not ask ourselves some such questions as this? What kind of thing naturally suffers dispersion? And for what kind of thing might we naturally fear it? And again, what kind of thing is not liable to it? And after this, must we not inquire to which class the soul belongs, and base our hopes or fears for our souls upon the answers to these questions?
You are quite right.
Now, is not that which is compounded and composite naturally liable to be decomposed in the same way in which it was compounded? And if anything is uncompounded, is not that, if anything, naturally unlikely to be decomposed?
I think that is true.
Then it is most probable that things which are always the same and unchanging are the uncompounded things, and the things that are changing and never the same are the composite things.
Yes, I think so.
Let us then turn to what we were discussing before. Is the absolute essence, which we in our dialectic process of question and answer call true being, always the same, or is it liable to change? Absolute equality, absolute beauty, any absolute existence, true being, do they ever admit of any change whatsoever? Or does each absolute essence
Here's my-
flip
Sorry.
the page here.
Do you see it, Jerry?
No,
Do other people see the changed page?
Since it is uniform, yeah.
Okay, now I see it. My computer's a little slow.
Okay.
Or does each absolute essence, since it is uniform and exists by itself, remain the same and never in any way admit of any change?
It must necessarily remain the same, Socrates.
But how about the many things, for example, men or horses or cloaks, or any other such things, which bear the same names as the absolute essences and are called beautiful or equal or the like? Are they always the same? Or are they in direct opposite to the essences, constantly changing in themselves, unlike each other, and, so to speak, never the same?
The latter, they are never the same.
And you can see these and touch them and perceive them by the other senses, whereas the things which are always the same can be grasped only by the reason and are invisible and not to be seen.
Certainly, that is true.
Now, shall we assume two kinds of existences, one visible, the other invisible,
Let us assume them.
and that the invisible is always the same and the visible constantly changing?
Let us assume that also.
Well then, are we not made up of two parts, body and soul?
Yes.
Now, to which class should we say the body is more similar and more closely akin?
To the visible, that is clear to everyone.
And the soul, is it visible or invisible?
Invisible to man, at least, Socrates.
But we call things visible and invisible with reference to human vision, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Then what do we say about the soul? Can it be seen or not?
It cannot be seen.
Then it is invisible.
Yes.
Then the soul is more like the invisible than the body is, and the body more like the visible.
Necessarily, Socrates.
Now, we have also been saying for a long time, have we not, that when the soul makes use of the body for an inquiry, either through seeing or hearing or any of the other senses, for inquiry through the body means inquiry through the senses, then it is dragged by the body to things which never remain the same, and it wanders about and is confused and dizzy like a drunken man because it lays hold upon such things.
Certainly.
But when the soul inquires alone by itself, it departs into the realm of the pure, the everlasting, the immortal, and the changeless. And being akin to these, it dwells always with them whenever it is by itself and is not hindered. And it has rest from its wanderings and remains always the same and unchanging with the changeless, since it is in communion therewith. And this state of the soul is called wisdom, is it not so?
Socrates, what you say is perfectly right and true.
And now again, in view of what we said before and of what has just been said, to which class do you think the soul has greater likeness and kinship?
I think, Socrates, that anyone, even the dullest, would agree after this argument that the soul is infinitely more like that which is always the same than that which is not.
And the body?
Is more like the other.
Consider then the matter in another way. When the soul and the body are joined together, nature directs the one to serve and be ruled, and the other to rule and be master. Now, this being the case, which seems to you like the divine, and which like the mortal? Or do you not think that the divine is by nature fitted to rule and lead, and the mortal to obey and serve?
Yes, I think so.
Which then does the soul resemble?
Clearly, Socrates, the soul is like the divine, and the body like the body like the mortal.
Then see, Cebes, if this is not the conclusion from all that we have said, that the soul is most like the divine and immortal and intellectual and uniform and indissoluble, indissoluble, and ever unchanging. And the body, on the contrary, most like the human and mortal and multiform and unintellectual and dissoluble and ever changing. Can we say anything, my dear Cebes, to show that this is not so?
No, we cannot.
Well then, since this is the case, is it not natural for the body to meet with speedy dissolution, and for the soul, on the contrary, to be entirely indissoluble, or nearly so?
Of course.
Observe that when a man dies, the visible part of him, the body, which lies in the visible world, and which we call the corpse, which is naturally subject to dissolution and decomposition, does not undergo these processes at once, but remains for a considerable time, and even for a very long time, if death takes place when the body is in good condition and at a favorable time of the year. For when the body is shrunk and embalmed, as is done in Egypt, it remains almost entire for an incalculable time. And even if the body decay, some parts of it, such as the bones and sinews and all that, are, so to speak, indestructible. Is not that true?
Yes.
But the soul, the invisible, which departs into another place, which is, like itself, noble and pure and invisible, to the realm of the God of the other world in truth, to the good and wise God, whither, if God will, my soul is soon to go, is this soul, which has such qualities and such a nature, straightway scattered and destroyed when it departs from the body, as most men say? Far from it, dear Cebes and Simmias, but the truth is much rather this. If it departs pure, dragging with it nothing of the body, because it never willingly associated with the body in life, but avoided it, and gathered itself into itself alone, since this has always been its constant study. But this means nothing else than that it pursued philosophy rightly, and really practiced being in a state of death. Or is not this the practice of death?
By all means.
Then, if it is in such a condition, it goes away into that which is like itself, into the invisible, divine, immortal, and wise. And when it arrives there, it is happy, freed from error and folly and fear and fierce loves and all the other human ills, and, as the initiated say, lives in truth through all after time with the gods. Is this our belief, Cebes, or not?
Assuredly.
But I think, if when it departs from the body, it is defiled and impure, because it was always with the body and cared for it and loved it and was fascinated by it and its desires and pleasures, so that it thought nothing was true except the corporeal, which one can touch and see and drink and eat and employ in the pleasures of love. And if it is accustomed to hate and fear and all avoid that which is shadowy and invisible to the eyes, but is intelligible and tangible to philosophy, do you think a soul in this condition will depart pure and uncontaminated?
By no means.
But it will be interpenetrated, I suppose, with the corporeal, which intercourse and communion with the body have made a part of its nature, because the body has been its constant companion and the object of its care.
Certainly.
And, my friend, we must believe that the corporeal is burdensome and heavy and earthly and visible. And such a soul is weighed down by this and is dragged back into the visible world through fear of the invisible and of the other world. And so, as they say, it flits about the monuments and the tombs, where shadowy shapes of souls have been seen. Figures of these souls which were not set free in purity, but retain something of the visible. And this is why they are seen.
That is likely, Socrates.
It is likely, Cebes, and it is likely that those are not the souls of the good, but those of the base, which are compelled to flit about such places as a punishment for their former evil mode of life. And they flit about until, through the desire of the corporeal which clings to them, they are again imprisoned in a body. And they are likely to be imprisoned in natures which correspond to the practices of their former life.
What natures do you mean, Socrates?
I mean, for example, that those who have indulged in gluttony and violence and drunkenness, and have taken no pains to avoid them, are likely to pass into the bodies of asses and other beasts of that sort. Do you not think so?
Certainly, that is very likely.
And those who have chosen injustice and tyranny and robbery pass into the bodies of wolves and hawks and kites. Where else can we imagine that they go?
Beyond a doubt, they pass into such creatures.
Then it is clear where all the others go, each in accordance with its own habits.
Yes, of course.
Then the happiest of those, and those who go to the best place, are those who have practiced by nature and habit, without philosophy or reason, the social and civil virtues which are called moderation and justice.
How are these happyists?
Don't you see? Is it not likely that they pass again into some such social and gentle species as that of bees or of wasps or ants, or into the human race again, and that worthy men spring from them?
Yes.
And no one who has not been a philosopher and who is not wholly pure when he departs is allowed to enter into the communion of the gods, but only the lover of knowledge. It is for this reason, dear Simmias and Cebes, that those who truly love wisdom refrain from all bodily desires and resist them firmly, and do not give themselves up to them, not because they fear poverty or loss of property, as most men in their love of money do, nor is it because they fear the dishonor or disgrace of wickedness, like the lovers of honor and power, that they refrain from them.
No, that would not be seemly for them, Socrates.
Most assuredly not. And therefore, those who care for their own souls and do not live in service to the body. Turn their backs upon all these men, and do not walk in their ways, for they feel that they know not whither they are going. They themselves believe that philosophy, with its deliverance and purification, must not be resisted, and so they turn and follow it whithersoever it leads.
How do they do this, Socrates?
I will tell you. The lovers of knowledge perceive that when philosophy first takes possession of their soul, it is entirely fastened and welded to the body, and is compelled to regard realities through the body, as through prison bars, not with its own unhindered vision, and is wallowing in utter ignorance. And philosophy sees that the most dreadful thing about the imprisonment is the fact that it is caused by the lusts of the flesh, so that the prisoner is the chief assistant in his own imprisonment. The lovers of knowledge, then, I say, perceive that philosophy, taking possession of the soul when it is in this state, encourages it gently and tries to set it free, pointing out that the eyes and the ears and the other senses are full of deceit, and urging it to withdraw from these, except in so far as their use is unavoidable, and exhorting it to collect and concentrate itself within itself, and to trust nothing except itself and its own abstract thought of abstract existence, and to believe that there is no truth in that which it sees by other means, and which varies with the various object in which it appears, since everything of that kind is visible and apprehended by the senses, whereas the soul itself sees that which is invisible and apprehended by the mind. Now the soul of the true philosopher believes that it must not resist this deliverance, and therefore it stands aloof from pleasures and lusts and griefs and fears so far as it can, considering that when anyone has violent pleasures or fears or griefs or lusts, he suffers from them not merely what one might think, for example, illness or loss of money spent for his lust, but he suffers the greatest and most extreme evil and does not take it into account.
What is this evil, Socrates?
The evil is that the soul of every man, when it is greatly pleased or pained by anything, is compelled to believe that the object which caused the emotion is very distinct and very true, but it is not. These objects are mostly the visible ones, are they not?
Certainly.
And when this occurs, is not the soul most completely put in bondage by the body?
How so?
Because each pleasure or pain nails it as with a nail to the body and rivets it on and makes it corporeal, so that it fancies the things are true which the body says are true. For because it has the same beliefs and pleasures as the body, it is compelled to adopt also the same habits and mode of life, and can never depart in purity to the other world, but must always go away contaminated with the body. And so it sinks quickly into another body again and grows into it, like seed that is sown. Therefore, it has no part in the communion with the divine and pure and absolute.
What you say, Socrates, is very true.
This, Cebes, is the reason why the true lovers of knowledge are temperate and brave, not the world's reason. Or do you disagree?
Certainly not.
No, for the soul of the philosopher would not reason as others do, and would not think it right that philosophy should set it free, and that then, when set free, it should give itself again into bondage to pleasure and pain, and engage in futile toil, like Penelope unweaving the web she wove. No, his soul believes that it must gain peace from these emotions, must follow reason and abide always in it, beholding that which is true and divine and not a matter of opinion, and making that its only food. And in this way it believes it must live, while life endures, and then at death pass on to that which is akin to itself and of like nature, and be free from human ills. A soul which has been nurtured in this way, Simmias and Cebes, is not likely to fear that it will be torn asunder at its departure from the body, and will vanish into nothingness, blown apart by the winds, and be no longer anywhere.
So now this is Phaedo reminiscing, saying, when Socrates had said this, there was silence for a long time, and Socrates himself was apparently absorbed in what had been said, as were also most of us. But Simmias and Cebes conversed a little with each other, and Socrates saw them and said,
Do you think there is any incompleteness in what has been said? There are still many subjects for doubt and many points open to attack, if anyone cares to discuss the matter thoroughly. If you are considering anything else, I have nothing to say. But if you are in any difficulty about these matters, do not hesitate to speak and discuss them yourselves, if you think anything better could be said on the subject, and to take me along with you in the discussion, if you think you can get on better in my company.
and Simmias said,
I think I finally came on here.
Yeah.
Socrates, I will tell you the truth. For some time, each of us has been in doubt and has been egging the other on and urging him to ask a question because we wish to hear your answer. And then, I'm missing. But hesitate to trouble you for fear that it may be disagreeable to you in your present misfortune.
and when he heard this, he laughed gently and said,
Ah, Simmias, I should have hard work to persuade other people that I do not regard my present situation as a misfortune. But when I cannot even make you believe it, but you are afraid, I am more churlish now than I used to be. And you seem to think I am inferior in prophetic power to the swans, who sing at other times also, but when they feel that they are to die, sing most and best in their joy, that they are to go to the God whose servants they are. But men, because of their own fear of death, misrepresent the swans and say that they sing for sorrow, in mourning for their own death. They do not consider that no bird sings when it is hungry or cold or has any other trouble. No, not even the nightingale or the swallow or the hoopoe, which are said to sing in lamentation. I do not believe they sing for grief, nor do the swans. But since they are Apollo's birds, I believe they have prophetic vision. And because they have foreknowledge of the blessings in the other world, they sing and rejoice on that day more than ever before. And I think that I am myself a fellow servant of the swans, and am consecrated to the same God, and have received from our Master a gift of prophecy no whit inferior to theirs, and that I go out from life with as little sorrow as they, So far as this is concerned, then, speak and ask whatever questions you please, so long as the 11 of the Athenians permit.
I got a quick question. Do swans actually do that before they die? They swing their,
Oh,
what's that?
I was wondering the same thing, Matt.
Yeah. So I guess I mean that's where I guess the expression "you sing your swan song" comes from.
Yeah.
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 Huh.
I guess it's true. Wherever could it come from?
If it endured this long, yeah, there's probably something to it.
Uh,
All right.
Good. I will tell you my difficulty, and then Cebes in turn will say why he does not agree to all you have said. I think, Socrates, as perhaps you do yourself, that is either impossible or very difficult to acquire clear knowledge about these matters in this life. And yet, he is a weakling who does not test in every way what is said about them and persevere until he is worn out by studying them on every side. For he must do one or two things. Either he must learn or discover the truth about these matters, or if that is impossible, he must take whatever human doctrine is best and hardest to disprove, and embarking upon it as upon a raft, sail upon it through life in the midst of dangers, unless he can sail upon some stronger vessel, some divine revelation, and make his voyage more safely and securely. And so now I am not ashamed to ask questions, since you encourage me to do so, and I shall not have to blame myself hereafter for not saying now what I think. For Socrates, when I examine what has been said, either alone or with Cebes, it does not seem quite satisfactory.
Perhaps, my friend, you are right. But tell me in what respect it is not satisfactory.
In this, that one might use the same argument about harmony and a lyre with its strings. One might say that the harmony is invisible and incorporeal and very beautiful and divine in the well-attuned lyre, but the lyre itself and its strings are bodies, and corporeal and composite and earthy and akin to that which is mortal. Now, if someone shatters the lyre or cuts and breaks the strings, what if he should maintain, by the same argument you employed, that the harmony could not have perished and must still exist? For there would be no possibility that the lyre and its strings, which are of mortal nature, still exist after the strings are broken, and the harmony, which is related and akin to the divine and the immortal, perish before that which is mortal. He would say that the harmony must still exist somewhere, and that the wood and the strings must rot away before anything could happen to it. And I fancy, Socrates, that it must have occurred to your own mind that we believe the soul to be something after this fashion, that our body is strung and held together by heat, cold, moisture, dryness, and the like, and the soul is a mixture and a harmony of these same elements when they are well and properly mixed. Now, if the soul is a harmony, it is clear that when the body is too much relaxed or is too tightly strung by diseases or other ills, the soul must of necessity perish, no matter how divine it is. like other harmonies in sounds and in all the works of artists, and the remains of each body will endure a long time until they are burnt or decayed. Now that shall we say to this, what shall we say to this argument? If anyone claims that the soul, being a mixture of the elements of the body, is the first to perish in what is called death.
Simmias raises a fair objection. Now, if any of you is readier than I, why does he not reply to him? For he seems to score a good point. However, I think before replying to him, we ought to hear what fault our friend Cebes finds with our argument, that we may take time to consider what to say, and then, when we have heard them, we can either agree with them if they seem to strike the proper note, or if they do not, we can proceed to argue in defense of our reasoning. Come, Cebes, tell us what it was that troubled you.
Well, I will tell you. The argument seems to me to be just where it was, and to be still open to the objection I made before. For I do not deny that it has been very cleverly, and, if I may say so, conclusively shown that the soul existed before it entered into this bodily form. But it does not seem to me prove that it will still exist when we are dead. I do not agree with Simmias's objection that the soul is not stronger and more lasting than the body, for I think it is far superior in all such respects. Why then, the argument might say, do you still disbelieve when you see that after a man dies, the weaker part still exists? Do you not think the stronger part must necessarily be preserved during the same length of time? Now see if my reply to this has any sense. I think I may, like Simmias, best express myself in a figure. It seems to me that it is much as if one should say about an old weaver who had died, that the man had not perished but was safe and sound somewhere, and should offer as a proof of this the fact that the cloak which the man had woven and used to wear was still whole and had not perished. Then, if anyone did not believe him, he would ask which lasts longer, a man or a cloak that is in use and wear. And when the answer was given that a man lasts much longer, you would think it had been proved beyond a doubt that the man was safe, because that which was less lasting had not perished.
Is that Socrates?
Oh, but I do not think he is right. Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. That's Cebes, I think.
Is it still me?
Yes.
Yes, it's you, Pascal.
Okay. But I do not think he is right, Simmias. And I ask you especially to notice what I say. Anyone can understand that a man who says this is talking nonsense. For the weaver in question wove and wore out many such cloaks and lasted longer than they, though they were many, but perished, I suppose, before the last one. Yet a man is not feebler or weaker than a cloak on that account at all. And I think the same figure would apply to the soul and the body, and it would be quite appropriate to say in like manner about them that the soul lasts a long time, but the body lasts a shorter time and is weaker. And one might go on to say that each soul wears out many bodies, especially if the man lives many years. For if the body is constantly changing and being destroyed while the man still lives, and the soul is always weaving anew that which wears out, then when the soul perishes, it must necessarily have on its last garment, and this only will survive it. And when the soul has perished, then the body will all once show its natural weakness and will quickly disappear in decay. And so we are not yet justified in feeling sure on the strength of this argument that our souls will still exist somewhere after we are dead. For if one were to grant even more to a man who uses your argument, Socrates, and allow not only that our souls existed before we were born, but also that there is nothing to prevent some of them from continuing to exist and from being born and dying again many times after we are dead, because the soul is naturally so strong that it can endure repeated births. Even allowing this, one might not grant that it does not suffer by its many births and does not finally perish altogether in one of its deaths. But he might say that no one knows beforehand the particular death and the particular dissolution of the body which brings destruction to the soul, for none of us can perceive that. Now, if this is the case, anyone who feels confident about death has a foolish confidence, unless he can show that the soul is altogether immortal and imperishable. Otherwise, a man who is about to die must always fear that his soul will perish utterly in the impending dissolution of the body.
Now this is the Phaedo.
Oh, okay.
Now, all of us, as we remarked to one another afterwards, were very uncomfortable when we heard what they said, for we had been thoroughly convinced by the previous argument, and now they seem to be throwing us again into confusion and distrust, not only in respect to the past discussion, but also with regards to any future one. They made us fear that our judgment was worthless, or that no certainty could be attained in these matters. Echecrates. Hey, Jerry, you want to be Echecrates, and when Socrates comes back in, that'll be Eureka? So that's Echecrates and Phaedo are in the future talking and reminiscing, like Phaedo is talking to Echecrates about what he experienced on the last day of Socrates. That's been the topic of this discussion for anyone listening in who missed the first reading.
Okay, Echecrates. By the gods, Phaedo, I sympathize with you. For I myself, after listening to you, am inclined to ask myself, what argument shall we believe henceforth? For the argument of Socrates was perfectly convincing, and now it has fallen into discredit. For the doctrine that the soul is a kind of harmony has always had, and has now, a wonderful hold upon me, and your mention of it reminded me that I had myself believed in it before. Now I must begin over again and find another argument to convince me that when a man dies, his soul does not perish with him. So, for heaven's sake, tell how Socrates continued the discourse, and whether he also, as you say the rest of you did, showed any uneasiness or calmly defended his argument? And did he defend it successfully? Tell us everything as accurately as you can.
Echecrates, I've often wondered at Socrates, but never did I admire him more than then. That he had an answer ready was perhaps to be expected, but what astonished me more about him was, first, the pleasant, gentle, and respectful manner in which he listened to the young men's criticism. Secondly, his quick sense of the effect their words had upon us, and lastly, the skill with which he cured us, and, as it were, recalled us from our flight and defeat, and made us face about and follow him and join in his examination of the argument.
How did he do it?
I'll tell you. I was sitting at his right hand on a low stool beside his couch, and his seat was a good deal higher than mine. He stroked my head and gathered the hair on the back of my neck into his hand. He had a habit of playing with my hair on occasion and said, Eureka? I mean Socrates, sorry.
Okay, I suppose so. Is that me?
You're Socrates, Eureka.
So yeah, you say tomorrow perhaps, Phaedo. You will cut off this beautiful hair.
Tomorrow, perhaps, Phaedo, you will cut off this beautiful hair.
Oh yeah, I suppose so, Socrates, said I.
Not if you take my advice.
What shall I do then? I asked.
You will cut it off today, and I will cut mine. If our argument dies and we cannot bring it to life again. If I were you and the argument escaped me, I would take an oath, like the Argives, not to let my hair grow until I had renewed the fight and won a victory over the argument of Simmias and Cebus.
But they say that even Heracles is not a match for two.
Well, call me to help you as your Lolas while there is still light.
I call upon you to help then, said I. Not as Heracles calling, I think it's Iolaus, but as Iolaus calling Heracles.
That is all one. But first let us guard against a danger.
Of what sort?
The danger of becoming misologists or haters of argument. As people become misanthropists or haters of man, for no worse evil can happen to a man than to hate argument. Misology and misanthropy arise from similar causes. For misanthropy arises from trusting someone implicitly without sufficient knowledge. You think the man is perfectly true and sound and trustworthy, and afterwards you find him base and false. Then you have the same experience with another person. By the time this has happened to a man a good many times, especially if it happens among those whom he might regard as his nearest and dearest friends, he ends by being in continual quarrels and by hating everybody and thinking there is nothing sound in anyone at all. Have you not noticed this?
Certainly.
Well, it is not disgraceful, and is it not plain that such a man undertakes to consort with men when he has no knowledge of human nature? For if he had knowledge when he dealt with them, he would think that the good and the bad are both very few, and those between the two are very many, for that is the case.
What do you mean?
I mean just what I might say about the large and small. Do you think there is anything more unusual than to find a very large or very small man, or dog, or other creature, or again one that is very quick or slow, very ugly or beautiful, very black or white? Have you not noticed that the extremes in all these instances are rare and few, and the examples between the extremes are very many?
To be sure.
And don't you think that if there were to be a competition in rascality, those who excelled would be very few in that also?
Very likely.
Yes, very likely. But it is not in that respect that arguments are like men. I was merely following your lead in discussing that. The similarity lies in this. When a man without proper knowledge concerning arguments has confidence in the truth of an argument and afterwards think that it is false, whether it really is or not, and this happens again and again, then you know those men, especially who have spent their time in disputation, come to believe that they are the wisest of men, that they alone have discovered that there is nothing sound or sure in anything, whether arguments or anything else, but all things go up and down like the tide in the Eurypus, and nothing is stable for any length of time.
Certainly, that is very true.
Then, Phaedo, if there is any system of argument which is true and sure and can be learned, it would be a sad thing if a man, because he has met with some of those arguments which seem to be sometimes true and sometimes false, should then not blame himself or his own lack of skill, but should end in his vexation by throwing the blame gladly upon the arguments, and should hate and revile them all the rest of his life, and be deprived of the truth and knowledge of reality.
Yes, by Zeus, it would be sad.
First, then, let us be on our guard against this, and let us not admit into our souls the notion that there is no soundness in arguments at all. Let us far rather assume that we ourselves are not yet in sound condition, and that we must strive manfully and eagerly to become so. You and the others, for the sake of all of your future life, and not because of my impending death, for I fear that I am not just now in a philosophical frame of mind as regards this particular question, but am contentious like quite uncultured persons. For when they argue about anything, they do not care what is the truth is in the matter they are discussing, but are eager only to make their own views seem true to their hearers. And I fancy I differ from them just now only to this extent. I shall not be eager to make what I say seem true to my hearers, except as a secondary matter, but shall be very eager to make myself believe it. For see, my friend, how selfish my attitude is. If what I say is true, I am the gainer by believing it. And if there be nothing for me after death, at any rate, I shall not be burdensome to my friends by my lamentations in these last moments. And this ignorance of mine will not last, for that would be an evil, but will soon end. So, Simmias and Cybis, I approach the argument with my mind thus prepared. But you, if you do as I ask, will give little thought to Socrates and much more to the truth. And if you think what I say is true, agree to it, and if not, oppose me with every argument you can muster, that I may not in my eagerness deceive myself and you alike and go away like a bee, leaving my sting sticking in you.
I think he continues.
But we must get to work. First, refresh my memory if I seem to have forgotten anything. Simmias, I think, has doubts and fears that the soul, though more divine and excellent than the body, may perish first, being of the nature of harmony. And Cebes, I believe, granted that the soul is more lasting than the body, but said that no one could know that the soul, after wearing out many bodies, did not at last perish itself upon leaving the body, and that this was death, the destruction of the soul, since the body is continually being destroyed. Are those the points, Simmias and Cebes, which we must consider?
They both agreed that these were the points.
Now, do you reject all of our previous arguments or only some of them?
Only
Only-
some.
What do you think about the argument in which we said that learning this recollection and that, since this is so, our soul must necessarily have been somewhere before it was imprisoned in the body?
I was wonderfully convinced by it at the time, but I still believe it more firmly than any other argument.
And I too feel just as he does. And I should be much surprised if I should ever think differently on this point.
You must, my Theban friend, think differently. If you persist in your opinion that a harmony is a compound and that the soul is a harmony made up of the elements that are strung like harp strings in the body, for surely you will not accept your own statement that a composite harmony existed before those things from which it had to be composed, will you? Certainly.
So that's Simmias.
Certainly not Socrates.
Certainly not Socrates. Okay.
Okay.
Then do you see that this is just what you say when you assert that the soul exists before it enters into the form of a body, a form and body of a man, and that it is composed of things that do not yet exist? For harmony is not what your comparison assumes it to be. The lyre and the strings and the sounds come into being in a tuneless condition, and the harmony is the lust of all to be composed and the first to perish. So how can you bring this theory into harmony with the other?
I cannot at all.
And yet, there ought to be harmony between it and the theory about harmony above all others.
Yes, there ought.
Well, there is no harmony between the two theories. Now, which do you prefer? That knowledge is recollection or that the soul is a harmony?
The former decidedly, Socrates, for this other came to me without demonstration. It merely seemed probable and attractive, which is the reason why many men hold it. I am conscious that those arguments which base their demonstrations on mere probability are deceptive. And if we are not on our guard against them, they deceive us greatly in geometry and in all other things. but the theory of recollection and knowledge has been established by a second course of argument. For we agreed that our soul, before it entered into the body, existed just as the very essence which is called the Absolute exists. Now I am persuaded that I have accepted this essence on sufficient and right grounds. I cannot therefore accept from myself or anyone else the statement that the soul is a harmony.
Do people generally follow that line of reasoning and how he was thinking falsely about his idea of the lyre and the harmony and the harmony wearing out as the soul would wear out, and how that was overthrown just now?
Socrates is saying that it exists outside of the lyre. The lyre is just sort of the instrument of, it's like the body, I assume. Is that
Yeah.
what you get? Okay.
Yeah, but additionally, there's something more to it too, because that's also what Simmias was saying. He agreed, but the idea of the recollection concept is important, because the idea of the soul having access to the eternal forms, the essences of things that are more than the material lower domain of the material reality that our senses can access, but our minds, which can access the eternal, can grasp simple substances that don't dissolve. Because that's what got the ball rolling, right? Was the question of what are the sorts of existences that dissolve, like smoke? Are they simple or are they compound? That's what Dmitry Mendeleev was also asking too when he's looking at the periodic table of elements. It's like, well, we got these things in nature. Some of them seem to be made up of other smaller things, and some of them are irreducible. And how do we think about those elements that are irreducible? So which is it's like things like justice or equality or things that are like beauty or harmony. Are they simple or are they compound substances?
I don't get that argument, simple or compound.
Oh, are they made up of things or are they simple? Like
there's something outside of talking, they exist in the absolute, I think is what he was saying.
yeah, like is something like harmony or equality or justice, like one of these essences? Do they decay? Can you break them in pieces and share them around, or are they integral? Are they not like that sort of thing?
They would be integral.
Yeah, so that would be the idea of the simple in this case. And so it's very, if that's true, then Simmias's line of thinking that the soul, like the jackets being worn, or no, his idea was that the person wearing the jackets would wear in his lifetime many jackets, and that would be like the soul wearing many people or many beings. It might live on past many lifetimes, but it could still die like the person dies. That couldn't be true, because the soul doesn't fall apart, like the harmony doesn't fall apart. Oh no, sorry, I'm mixing them up. I just totally mixed them up, guys. Sorry. Yeah, I took CB's argument by accident just now. No, sorry, I meant the lyre. That the lyre, as it gets old and as it loses its tuning and the strings break, the harmony breaks, and that means that the soul breaks before the body. That doesn't stand on firm ground, because the soul can't break that way. It's simple. It's non-dissolvable. Right. Am I wrong, Pascal, or am I missing anything, Jerry?
I don't know. That was CB's. Yeah, you're right. You were mixing them up.
Okay. All right.
That's fine.
Okay.
But yeah, Socrates said, he juxtaposed both. He said, so there's this recollection idea and the harmony, to which Simmias said, no, I agree more with the recollection. No. Isn't
Yeah.
that right? Or it made more sense?
Well, what were the conditions that? Oh yeah, that you mean between the two theories? One that the soul, that knowledge is recollection, and that the other one that the soul is harmony. And he
Yeah.
says, yeah, he has more faith that the soul, or that knowledge is recollection.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I like what he said after that too.
What's that?
He says, "It seemed to me without demonstration. It just seemed probable."
Yeah.
It's the same problem we have today well, particularly in science, but you're just looking for what's probable. I mean, even call it probability theory.
Mm-hmm.
You're not actually trying to, use demonstration to prove your theory, to prove your idea. You're just trying to prove it's the most probable of the ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's that theory called that they use to justify like fascist policies? There's a name for it. Like the preventative principle. Is that it? The preventative principle is the word. Where they say, well, global warming. Precautionary. That's the word. Precautionary principle. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, global warming may or may not be made by human CO2 or.
But just in case.
But just in case, let's shut down industrial civilization just in case. Or COVID-19 may or may not actually be really, the new Black Plague, but just in case, probabilistically, let's shut down, the global economy. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Arguments based on probability and statistics are very deceptive.
So this way, people won't die from COVID. They will die from something else.
Yeah. We'll make sure they die of starvation. That way we'll save them from dying of COVID. I like also, oh, sorry, what was that? What was that? Oh yeah, Cynthia's just she's writing something in the other room, and she just overheard this, and she said, "Yeah, that's what's going on in Vietnam right now, where they're just shutting everything down over some."
Oh yeah.
The other thing that I liked in this little section we just read is on the question of what causes somebody to become a misanthrope or a misologist.
Mm-hmm.
That's really because I think we've all had experiences seeing people who either like fit those two categories, right? People who actually they naively gave their faith in somebody, whether it's a teacher or a parent or many teachers or whatever, L. Ron Hubbard type of leader, and then they realize, okay, this person's a total degenerate liar, and I totally thought they were virtuous, and then they get burned so many times that they just start thinking all people are terrible, and they just start hating human beings, or people who just start hating arguments because they used a false line of reasoning that burnt them so many times that they start blaming they blame the act of reasoning itself as being the problem, and then they just hate reason rather than thinking maybe you did something wrong and you should try to maybe correct or find a different way of using your reason more wisely instead of just throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
That's the first I'd seen that term. What do they call it?
Logicist or something? I don't know. What they call it?
Something, I don't know. It's back there, but
Jerry's been writing it.
Or what
was that, Jerry?
Misology.
Misology, that's it. Yeah.
Misology and misanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Sad. Very sad.
The misanthrope, that was one of Moliere's plays, right? The title.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know about.
Me too. All right. So the first of the two hypotheses has been handled pretty well by Socrates. Now the second one by Cebes, that the the soul is like the body wearing the jackets, many jackets before the body dies. That one has not been addressed yet. Socrates, I think, is up.
Here is another way of looking at it, Simmias. Do you think a harmony or any other composite thing can be in any other state than that which the element are of which is composed?
Certainly not.
Oh, I was wrong. Sorry, we're continuing on the refutation of Simmias for people listening. Sorry.
And it can neither nor suffer anything other than they do or suffer? Then a harmony cannot be expected to lead the elements of which is composed, but to follow them. A harmony, then, is quite unable to move or make a sound or do anything else that is opposite to its component parts.
Quite unable, said he. All right.
Well then, is not every harmony by nature a harmony according as it is harmonized?
I do not understand.
Would it not be more completely a harmony and a greater harmony if it were harmonized more fully and to a greater extent, assuming that to be possible, and less completely a harmony and a lesser harmony, if less completely harmonized and to a less extent?
Certainly.
Is this true of the soul? Is one soul even in the slightest degree more completely and to a greater extent a soul than another, or less completely to a less extent?
Not in the least.
Well now, one soul is said to possess sense and virtue and to be good, and another to possess folly and wickedness and to be bad. And is this true?
Yes, it is true.
Now, what will those who assume that the soul is a harmony say that these things, the virtue and the wickedness in the soul are? Will they say that this is another kind of harmony and a discord, and that the soul, which is itself a harmony, has within it another harmony, and that the other soul is discordant and has no other harmony within it?
I cannot tell, but evidently those who make that assumption would say something of that sort.
Hey, Eureka, is there like a playground next to you?
Yes, right beside me. Is it?
Oh.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a little, you can hear something in the background.
Yeah,
you can let Gerald continue because
yeah,
the kids are acting up.
I guess maybe that might be good. Yeah, it's hard to focus. Sorry.
Okay.
You're Socrates again there, Joe. But we agree, I think, is where it's...
But we agreed.
Socrates' soul is going from body to body.
But we agreed that one soul is no more or less a soul than another. And that is equivalent to an agreement that one is no more and to no greater extent, and no less and to no less extent a harmony than another. Is it not?
Certainly.
And that which is no more or less a harmony is no more or less harmonized. Is that so?
Yes.
But has that which is no more and no less harmonized, no, but has that which is no more and no less harmonized any greater or any less amount of harmony, or an equal amount?
Uh, I think I was supposed to say an equal amount, but then no.
Then
Then
the soul, since it is neither more nor less a soul than another, is neither more nor less harmonized,
that is so.
and therefore can have no greater amount of discord or of harmony.
No,
And therefore, again, one soul can have no greater amount of wickedness or virtue than another, if wickedness is discord and virtue harmony.
it cannot.
Or rather, to speak exactly, Simmias, no soul will have any wickedness at all if the soul is a harmony. And if a harmony is entirely harmony, it could have no part in discord.
Certainly not.
Then the soul, being entirely soul, could have no part in wickedness.
How could it? If what we have said is right.
According to this argument, then, if all souls are by nature equally souls, all souls of all living creatures will be equally good.
So it seems, Socrates.
And do you think that this is true and that our reasoning would have come to this end if the theory that the soul is a harmony were correct?
Not in the least.
Well, of all the parts that make up a man, do you think any is ruler except the soul, especially if it be a wise one?
No, I do not.
Does it yield to the feelings of the body or oppose them? I mean, when the body is hot and thirsty, does not the soul oppose it and draw it away from drinking and from eating when it is hungry? And do we not see the soul opposing the body in countless other ways?
Certainly.
Did we not agree in our previous discussion that it could never, if it be a harmony, give forth a sound at variance with the tensions and relaxations and vibrations and other conditions of the elements which compose it, but that it would follow them and never leave them?
Yes, we did, of course.
Well then, do we not now find that the soul acts in exactly the opposite way, leading those elements of which it is said to consist and opposing them in almost everything through all of life, and tyrannizing over them in every way, sometimes inflicting harsh and painful punishments, those of gymnastics and medicine, and sometimes milder ones, sometimes threatening, and sometimes admonishing. In short, speaking to the desires and passions and fears as if it were distinct from them and they from it, as Homer has shown in the Odyssey when he says of Odysseus, he smote his breast, and thus he chid his heart. Endure it, heart, thou didst bear worse than this. Do you suppose that when he wrote those words, he thought of the soul as a harmony, which would be led by the conditions of the body, and not rather as something fitted to lead and rule them, and itself a far more divine thing than a harmony?
By Zeus, Socrates. The latter, I think.
Then, my good friend, it will never do for us to say that the soul is a harmony, for we should, it seems, agree neither with Homer, the divine poet, nor with ourselves.
That is true.
Very well. Harmonia, the Theban goddess, has, it seems, been moderately gracious to us. But how, Cebes, and by what argument can we find grace in the sight of Cadmus?
Pascal, I think that
I think, yeah, I think you will find a way. At any rate, you conducted this argument against harmony wonderfully, and better than I expected. For when Simmias was telling of his difficulty, I wondered if anyone could make head against his argument. So it seemed to me very remarkable that it could not withstand the first attack of your argument. Now, I should not be surprised if the argument of Cadmus met with the same fate.
My friend, do not be boastful, lest some evil eye put to rout the argument that is to come. That, however, is in the hands of God. Let us, in Homeric fashion, charge the foe, and test the worth of what you say. Now, the sum total of what you seek is this. You demand a proof that our soul is indestructible and immortal. If the philosopher, who is confident in the face of death, and who thinks that after death he will fare better in the other world than if he had lived his life differently, is not to find his confidence senseless and foolish. And although we show that the soul is strong and godlike and existed before we men were born as men, all this, you say, may bear witness not to immortality, but only to the fact that the soul lasts a long while and existed somewhere an immeasurably long time before our birth, and knew and did various things. Yet it was none the more immortal for all that, but its very entrance into the human body was the beginning of its dissolution, a disease, as it were. And it lives in toil through this life, and finally perishes in what we call death. Now, it makes no difference, you say, whether a soul enters into a body once or many times, so far as the fear each of us feels is concerned. For anyone, unless he is a fool, must fear if he does not know and cannot prove that the soul is immortal. That, Cebes, is, I think, about what you mean. And I restate it purposely, that nothing may escape us, and that you may, if you wish, add or take away anything.
I do not at present wish to take anything away or to add anything. You have expressed my meaning. That's Phaedo.
Oh. Socrates paused for some time and was absorbed in thought. Then he said,
It is no small thing that you seek, for the cause of generation and decay must be completely investigated. Now, I will tell you my own experience in the matter, if you wish. Then, if anything I say seems to you to be of any use, you can employ it for the solution of your difficulty.
Certainly, I wish to hear your experiences.
Listen then, and I will tell you. When I was young, Cebes, I was tremendously eager for the kind of wisdom which they call investigation of nature. I thought it was a glorious thing to know the causes of everything, why each thing comes into being, and why it perishes, and why it exists. And I was always unsettling myself with such questions as these. Do heat and cold, by a sort of fermentation, bring about the organization of animals, as some people say? Is
Page square.
All right.
Is it the blood, or air, or fire by which we think? Or is it none of these? And does the brain furnish the sensations of hearing and sight and smell? And do memory and opinion arise from these? And does knowledge come from memory and opinion in a state of rest? And again, I tried to find out how these things perish. And I investigated the phenomena of heaven and earth until finally I made up my mind that I was, by nature, totally unfitted for this kind of investigation. And I will give you a sufficient proof of this. I was so completely blinded by these studies that I had lost the knowledge that I, and others also, thought I had before. I forgot what I had formerly believed I knew about many things, and even about the cause of man's growth. For I had thought previously that it was plain to everyone that man grows through eating and drinking. For when, from the food he eats, flesh is added to his flesh, and bones to his bones. And in the same way, the appropriate thing is added to each of his other parts. Then the small bulk becomes greater, and the small man large. That is what I used to think. Doesn't that seem to you reasonable?
Seabiz?
All right. Yes.
Now listen to this too. I thought I was sure enough when I saw a tall man standing by a short one that he was, say, taller by a head than the other, and that one horse was larger by a head than another horse. And to mention still clearer things than those, I thought 10 were more than 8 because 2 had been added to the 8. And I thought a 2-cubit rule was longer than a 1-cubit rule because it exceeded it by half its length.
And now, what do you think about them?
By Zeus, I am far from thinking that I know the cause of any of these things. I, who do not even dare to say, when one is added to one, whether the one to which the addition was made has become 2, or the one which was added, or the one which was added and the one to which it was added became 2 by the addition of each to the other. I think it is wonderful that when each of them was separate from the other, each was 1 and they were not then 2. And when they were brought near each other, this juxtaposition was the cause of their becoming 2. And I cannot yet believe that if one is divided, the division causes it to become 2. For this is the opposite of the cause which produced 2 in the former case. For then 2 arose because one was brought near and added to another one. And now because one is removed and separated from another. And I no longer believe that I know by this method even how one is generated, or in a word, how anything is generated, or is destroyed, or exists. And I no longer admit this method, but have another confused way of my own.
Did everyone follow the paradox that he's generating here?
No, could you explain that for us? Because I'm not sure about when he's talking about dividing one and getting 2 or whatever.
Pascal or Jerry, you guys want to try your hand at it?
2 parts. Okay. All right. All right. They're a little slow. Hey, don't give me algebra, huh?
No, that's fine. Jerry, Pascal, when you two guys want to try it out?
What's that?
Pascal, you've been volunteered.
Well, if I recall, he was saying, so if you have 1 plus 1, You get two, but what happened with the one? Is the one like the two becomes a one also, right? It becomes the new unity, kind of, or yeah, and the one kind of disappears then, but it's still kind of part of it. And I must admit I kind of jump off at a certain point.
No, that's good. That's part of it that I forgot.
Getting a little bit tired, but
yeah, no, I hear you, man. No, that's part I actually missed that part, and I'm grateful that you said that, because I was thinking about it only from the part where he says, well, like, what causes two? He's like, it used to be so self-evident, 1 + 1 is 2. But then he's like, but if you think about it in another way, if you got one thing, right, one piece of paper, I divide it in two. Now I got 2 pieces of paper. So was it the act of adding or the act of dividing that caused 2 to happen? Because now all of a sudden you have 2 different causes to get the same effect. So I don't even know what that is. And then what Pascal just said even made it more complex, because it's like, but 2 is itself a unity of a sort because it's not 1. So what the hell is that? So he's saying it's more complex than a lot of people realized, including his younger self and his older self too. He's like, because he's getting at the question of causality. And I think this section is one of the richest sections, which has a lot of relevance for the problems in science even today. Because he's like, well, when I was young, I wanted to know the causes of things. And I was on a path where I was studying science, and the path I was on caused me to start forgetting things that I used to know were true. And I think that's happened to a lot of us, right? When we're young, we have certain intuitive knowledge of things. Like, I used to think that, the universe must be beautiful because there were flowers and other things when I was a kid. And then I remember when I was in university, I stopped thinking that, because that's not scientific. That's one example that just struck my mind when I was reading Socrates here. But yeah, like, what causes something to be more or less, or to dissolve, or to come together? What are the causal principles that are invisible that cause these things to happen, that our senses pick up? And what's a good method versus a bad method? And he's obviously been on bad methods when he was young, and then he's going through now after this example of on the number 2, he's like, okay, now he goes through the example of finally finding a teacher he thought he could trust. Named Anaxagoras, I think his name is, right?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, you want me to continue?
Sure.
Then one day I heard a man reading from a book, as he said, by Anaxagoras, that it is the mind that arranges and causes all things. I was pleased with this theory of cause, and it seemed to me to be somehow right, that the mind should be the cause of all things. And I thought, if this is so, the mind, in arranging things, arranges everything and establishes each thing as it is best for it to be. So if anyone wishes to find the cause of the generation or destruction or existence of a particular thing, he must find out what sort of existence or passive state of any kind or activity is best for it. And therefore, in respect to that particular thing, and other things too, a man need examine nothing but what is best and most excellent. For then he will necessarily know also what is inferior, since the science of both is the same. As I considered these things, I was delighted to think that I had found in Anaxagoras a teacher of the cause of things quite to my mind. And I thought he would tell me whether the earth is flat or round, and when he had told me that, would go on to explain the cause and the necessity of it, and would tell me the nature of the best and why it is best for the earth to be as it is. And if he said the earth was in the center, he would proceed to show that it is best for it to be in the center. and I had made up my mind that if he made those things clear to me, I would no longer yearn for any other kind of cause. And I determined that I would find out in the same way about the sun and the moon and the other stars, their relative speed, their revolutions, and their other changes, and why the active or passive condition of each of them is for the best. For I never imagined that when he said they were ordered by intelligence, he would introduce any other cause for these things than that it is best for them to be as they are. So I thought when he assigned the cause of each thing and of all things in common, he would go on and explain what is best for each and what is good for all in common. I prized my hopes very highly, and I seized the books very eagerly and read them as fast as I could, that I might know as fast as I could about the best and the worst. My glorious hope, my friend, was quickly snatched away from me. As I went on with my reading, I saw that the man made no use of intelligence and did not assign any real causes for the ordering of things, but mentioned as causes air and ether and water and many other absurdities. And it seemed to me it was very much as if one should say that Socrates does with intelligence whatever he does, and then in trying to give the cause of the particular thing I do, should say first that I am now sitting here because my body is composed of bones and sinews, and the bones are hard and have joints which divide them, and the sinews can be contracted and relaxed, and with the flesh and the skin which contains them all are laid about the bones. And so the bones are hung loose in their ligaments, the sinews, by relaxing and contracting, make me able to bend my limbs now, and that is the cause of my sitting here with my legs bent. Or, as if in the same way, he should give voice and air and hearing and countless other things of the sort as causes for our talking with each other, and should fail to mention the real causes, which are that the Athenians decided that it was best to condemn me, and therefore I have decided that it was best for me to sit here, and that it is right for me to stay and undergo whatever penalty they order. For by the dog, I fancy these bones and sinews of mine would have been in Megara or Bothia long ago, carried thither by an opinion of what was best, if I did not think it was better and nobler to endure any penalty the city may inflict rather than to escape and run away. But it is most absurd to call things of that sort causes. If anyone were to say that I could not have done what I thought proper if I had not bones and sinews and other things that I have, he would be right. But to say that those things are the cause of my doing what I do, and that I act with intelligence, but not from the choice of what is best, would be an extremely careless way of talking. Whoever talks in that way is unable to make a distinction and to see that in reality, a cause is one thing, and the thing without which the cause could never be a cause is quite another thing. And so it seems to me, where am I? And so it seems to me that most people, when they give the name of cause to the latter, are groping in the dark, as it were, and are giving it a name that does not belong to it. And so one man makes the earth stay below the heavens by putting a vortex about it, and another regards the earth as a flat trough supported on a foundation of air. But they do not look for the power which causes things to be now placed as it is best for them to be placed, nor do they think it has any divine force, but they think they can find a new Atlas, more powerful and more immortal and more all-embracing than this. And in truth, they give no thought to the good, which must embrace and hold things and hold together all things. Now I would gladly be the pupil of anyone who would teach me the nature of such a cause. But since that was denied me, and I was not able to discover it myself and to learn of it from anyone else, do you wish me, Cebes, to give you an account of the way in which I have conducted my second voyage in quest of the cause?
Well, you're gonna have to wait for Kepler, I think.
Yeah, he said a lot in that last.
Yeah,
That's
that
gorgeous.
was great. That was great. I really liked the end. Wow.
Yeah.
I wish it with all my heart.
After this, then, since I had given up investigating realities, I decided that I must be careful not to suffer the misfortune which happens to people who look at the sun and watch it during an eclipse. For some of them ruin their eyes unless they look at its image in water or something of the sort. I thought of that danger, and I was afraid my soul would be blinded if I looked at things with my eyes and tried to grasp them with any of my senses. So I thought I must have recourse to conceptions and examine in them the truth of realities. Now, perhaps my metaphor is not quite accurate, for I do not grant in the least that he who studies realities by means of conceptions is looking at them in images any more than he who studies them in the facts of daily life. However, that is the way I began. I assume in each case some principle which I consider strongest. And whatever seems to me to agree with this, whether relating to cause or to anything else, I regard as true. And whatever disagrees with it is untrue. But I want to tell you more clearly what I mean, for I think you do not understand now.
Not very well, certainly.
Well, this is what I mean. It is nothing new, but the same thing I have always been saying, both in our previous conversation and elsewhere. I am going to try to explain to you the nature of that cause which I have been studying. And I will revert to those familiar subjects of ours as my point of departure and assume that there are such things as absolute beauty and good and greatness and the like. If you grant this and agree that these exist, I believe I shall explain cause to you and shall prove that the soul is immortal.
You may assume that I grant it and go on.
Then, see if you agree with me in the next step. I think that if anything is beautiful besides absolute beauty, it is beautiful for no other reason than because it partakes of absolute beauty. And this applies to everything. Do you assent to this view of cause?
I do.
Now, I do not yet understand, nor can I perceive those other ingenious causes. If anyone tells me that what makes a thing beautiful is its lovely color, or its shape, or anything else of the sort, I let all that go, for all those things confuse me. And I hold simply and plainly, and perhaps foolishly, to this, that nothing else makes it beautiful but the presence or communion, call it which you please, of absolute beauty, however it may have been gained. About the way in which it happens, I make no positive statement as yet, but I do insist that beautiful things are made beautiful by beauty. For I think this is the safest answer I can give to myself or to others. And if I cleave fast to this, I think I shall never be overthrown. And I believe it is safe for me or anyone else to give this answer, that beautiful things are beautiful through beauty. Do you agree?
I do.
And great things are great, and greater things greater by greatness, and smaller things smaller by smallness.
Yes.
And you would not accept the statement if you were told that one man was greater or smaller than another by a head, but you would insist that you say only that every greater thing is greater than another by nothing else than greatness, and that it is greater by reason of greatness, and that which is smaller by nothing else than smallness, and is smaller by reason of smallness. For you would, I think, be afraid of meeting with the retort if you said that a man was greater or smaller than another by a head. First, that the greater is greater, and the smaller is smaller by the same thing. And secondly, that the greater man is greater by a head, which is small, and that it is a monstrous thing that one is great by something that is small. Would you not be afraid of this?
You get
Aha. Yes, I should.
this is sort of like a carryover from what he was getting at with his earlier problem of like what causes two. Is it one added to one or something divided into two that causes two? Because now he's like, yeah, like, well, do you guys, Bob or Eureka, do you guys get what he's saying here about the proper or more responsible way of measuring something as greater or smaller than something else, and like what's a good way or a bad way of thinking? Kind of a little bit.
I'm not sure if I did or whether because so give us a synopsis and that because
Okay.
I can kind of it's very warm up here now. It's getting warm. I don't have the air conditioning on, so I can hear you.
Yeah.
I tend to doze off maybe sometimes.
No, don't worry about it, man. Yeah, it's good just to occasionally do a little bit of a little mini recap, just to get the mind into Socrates' mind. But yeah, like if you have something, because you're always measuring, right? Our minds are always measuring and passing judgment over things that we see with our senses as we try to form an idea, a map of what reality is, whether it's the shape of the earth or whether we're moving or the earth is standing still or what else. Like in big things and little things, we're always like measuring mentally according to standards and with methods. And he's saying, well, it's a lot of people are obsessed with one-dimensional thinking, where you just take a ruler and it's like a one-dimensional thing and you try to like measure why somebody who's small is smaller than somebody taller, and you're like, they're smaller because they're 12 inches smaller. That's why they're smaller. But then you're like, but that's the same answer why that other person is bigger. So 12 inches or like one head is both the cause of somebody in that world, you're saying that that's the cause of somebody being bigger is 12 inches. And it's also 12 inches the cause of somebody being smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So how could one thing have two effects, right? Being smaller and bigger, which that thing itself is kind of small. So how could something small cause something greater? Like how could 12-inch something small cause something bigger? Which is, he's saying that's an absurdity. Like how could, something small cause something big, or how could something cause its opposite? So that's an absurdity, where he said a more reasonable way is to think more in like a higher dimension of thinking, which doesn't give you that same type of answer, but you're going to be right. It's more reliable, which is that this person is taller than this person because they participate more in tallness, than the small person does, who participates more in smallness or beauty. You know, this painting is more beautiful than this painting because it participates more in beauty. That's why it's beautiful, not because of the paint. It's not beautiful because of the paint use or the red matched with the yellow. That's not a good sufficient reason why something is beautiful. It's more that it participates in beauty, which is a more
By participate, you mean it's inherently beautiful, right?
well, that there is inherent beauty. Like he's like, that's why he started his argument saying, like, do we all agree that absolutes exist, these absolute states? Yes, we do. Okay, then we can proceed. And so things participate more or less in those absolutes. They're expressions or instruments, you know, that channel that goodness or that beauty, lesser or more. But they are not the beauty, right? You destroy the beautiful painting, beauty still exists. It wasn't the painting. It was just an expression of the beauty, right?
Yeah.
It's a different way of thinking.
It's also, I was thinking, you know, like you could have someone say, you know, yeah, you know about Alexander the Great? And you could answer, well, I don't know. How tall was he? Or I've seen taller men, you know. So what made him great? What, you know, like what's that? Is it quantity or is it quality?
Right.
That's also interesting, you know, to look at. And you know, just kind of, how do you judge something to be great or not? You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting and funny at the same time.
Yeah, quantity and quality. That's it. Yeah, and that's where a lot of people like Bertrand Russell and a lot of the 20th century social engineers who are really evil bastards, they all use the same stupid line of reasoning to try to disprove the existence of any type of truth existing, because they say, well, you know, your eye sees quantitatively when all five of us look at the shade of red on a jacket, our eyes might pick up slightly different, you know, 1/1,000,000th of a different degree wavelengths of that same red. So we're actually seeing different red. And so because we see different quantities of wavelengths, there is no truth. Shit like that. It's like you're really, really trying to replace quantity for quality, right? Or just because you can't exactly measure perfectly something with a ruler, you're always going to be off a little bit in the you know, a ruler is linear. Everything that exists is nonlinear in some way. If it exists in reality in space-time, they're like, well, because it's not perfectly measurable, that measurability doesn't exist in a perfect way. There is no truth. It's like, fuck. It's really lame.
Yeah. Well, it's the way they do with the relativity of everything after Darwin. You know, and it's sort of like if anything goes, there is no, you know, there is no God, therefore anything goes. And that was Nietzsche, and a whole, you know, a whole bunch of people took that up in different directions, but it existed for a long time.
Yeah, man.
It exists today, of course. The people you're mentioning in science, right?
Yeah, it's like a nice tautology, a circular line of reasoning, because it's like, yeah, because there's no God, anything goes, and because anything goes and everything's random, there is no God. So it's like a complete lazy reasoning, as Leibniz would call it.
It seems like Anaxagoras was he was one of the first to develop the theory of atoms.
Oh yeah.
I
didn't know that. So he was like a teacher of like Democritus and Epicurus and stuff, or?
I guess, I don't know. He comes like around 500 BC.
Oh, really old. Okay.
Around that time. I don't know Democritus. When is Democritus? But
well, Socrates is saying that Anaxagoras was, oh, it wasn't his living teacher. He read a book by Anaxagoras, so Anaxagoras could have been dead for a long time. Yeah, right.
I think Anaxagoras came to Athens at the request of who was it? Oh,
A political leader or a philosopher?
Pericles. I think it was Pericles.
No, that couldn't have been it
No, that's
because
not possible.
yeah,
Okay.
Pericles came in Socrates' lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm thinking.
Yeah, Democritus must have been a student because he's around 460, born in 460.
Hmm.
Anaxagoras would be 400 BC to 428. Democritus around 460 to 370.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I tend to think of things in using the Battle of Marathon, and that was like I think 390, if I'm correct. But then Socrates came after that, right? Just after that, and Pericles before, and then Socrates. But it's it's good to keep some of those landmarks and dates because it's easy, at least for me, to be off 1,000 years when you start going in further than that, like getting into Egypt and stuff like that.
Yeah. The you're totally right. These yeah, having like a timeline with these like big key events is so useful. And yeah, Marathon was, it says here in Wikipedia, 490 BC.
Oh, 490. Okay,
Yeah. So that overlaps the time frames we're talking here too. I guess that was around the time Anaxagoras would have just arrived a little bit earlier. Democritus would have been alive.
So Salamis would be 480 about then.
What's that?
Salamis would be 480. The Battle of Salamis, the naval battle. Of,
Yeah.
before that, and then the Battle of Salamis. Okay.
Yeah.
Hydro stops me there. So then Socrates, we're talking replacing, is he in the 400s or the 300s?
Yeah, Socrates is 470 to 399.
Oh, 470 to 399. Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is for people who have made it this far in the YouTube video, I'll just make a reference here to Cynthia's class on Plato and the cult of Apollo at Delphi, which I'll put as a link in the description box to this video, which is a really great class going through this whole period of the Battle of Marathon and Battle of Salamis and the fight against the Persians and the infusion of the...
It was a great class, and it's a good link, yeah.
So that's good. Do you guys want to? I noticed it's 10:16, so I think now's probably a good time. He hasn't really dived really deeply into his argument to help out Seebe's and Seebe's hypothesis about the soul as a human wearing the many bodies of coats, during a lifetime, and then dying away just like the bodies do, but later on. So you guys want to just stop it here?
Yeah, sure.
That sounds like a good spot.
Okay. Who wants to do the recap next Wednesday?
Jerry's the guy that's taking notes.
Way to pass the buck, Bob.
You volunteered me again, Bob.
Pascal's going to entertain us on Sunday, right? With the JFK?
Oh, yes. Yeah. He's going to be busy.
Pascal, don't fall asleep now. You got homework. That's going to be, you're going to get a lot of questions on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my notes.
Special. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pascal, if you can give me maybe the title of the JFK class, and tomorrow morning I'll send out the invitation to everyone with the Zoom link.
Oh boy, I already changed like 3 times.
All right, I'll just make something up. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So what's another time, Pascal? One more.
I had entitled it at first Kennedy and Beyond, but I don't know. It's
Beyond. Why not? Eternity and Beyond.
Good.
The muses will continue to dance with you, and we'll see what happens. So I'm looking forward to it on Sunday.
all right.
All right.
All right.
Catch you guys later.
We'll do it. All right. Just see you guys next week.
All right. To Immortality and Beyond.
Yes.
Okay.
See you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Ciao.